couple of weeks ago, I took a look at the Penguin from Batman Returns, and this is from Mattel's own DC Multiverse line from a few years ago. I thought I'd follow that video up by looking at another movie-related character, and this week it's going to be Alfred Pennyworth, a somewhat offbeat, unusual choice for a toy line like this, but actually, when you think about it, quite an essential one. And unless I'm very much mistaken, this is probably the only 6-inch version of the movie, or the Michael Gough Alfred, that we've ever had in toy form. And what's particularly nice about this release is that it can be any version of Alfred, because you actually have a number of different heads that allows us to be Alfred from a number of different sources in the DC Multiverse. So, as ever, let's kick off by looking at the packaging. Well, as we saw with the Penguin, it's kind of unusual packaging. It's a very odd shape. It's mostly oblong, but then at the bottom we have this sort of trapezoid kind of shape where it kind of ducks in a little bit, and it's very blue, isn't it? There's a lot of blue here. That's clearly the brand. I'm not sure how I feel about this overall. Now, we do have this window display, which is quite nice. Of course, we can see the figure and all the bits and pieces that it comes with, which is brilliant stuff. And we have this image here taken from the comic books of Alfred, which I think looks really nice. The rest of it, I think, is presentable, maybe a little bit bland, but by no means is this bad at all. And the good thing is, of course, it is a window display, so you could hang this up on your shelf, or you can hang it on your wall if you want to make use of that hook there. The side panel is actually surprisingly thick for a figure of this size, and they've made good use of this space by having the DC logo, which looks quite nice there at the top, and then we have that image of Alfred again. So if you wanted to stack these figures up on the shelf, you could easily identify who it is, and I think it would make quite an attractive collection. The reverse of the packaging is mostly concerned with the Builder-Figure, which is Killer Croc in this instance, and of course there is a Builder-Figure piece with the Alfred figure. I think it's the right arm, and of course we can see the other figures in this wave as well, including a Batman, a Robin, and a Red Hood, so a pretty interesting wave. And again, at the top of the packaging we can see that image of Alfred there that we've seen both on the front and the side panels of this packaging. So I'm going to take a look at this figure with the Michael Gough head, because that's how I'm choosing to interpret this version of the character in keeping with the other Batman film-related characters I've been looking at lately. Now, I have to say, I think this sculpt is actually surprisingly really good. This is immediately very apparent who this is meant to be. You can tell that this is a good likeness of Michael Gough, and I think they've done a really nice job, not just with the sculpt, but also the paint apps as well. We can actually see a bit of a wash run through the hair to give it a bit more texture. With the skin tone seems to be nicely done, the eyebrows and the glasses there as well. All very nicely done. Quite a lot of detail here, and looks pretty good for a figure of this scale. The body sculpt is surprisingly good, and I say that in sharp contrast to the Penguin figure, which was absolutely fine, but it was quite simplistic, and it felt very plasticky, it felt very hollow if you saw that video. This feels a lot more textured and seems to have a lot more depth to it. I really like how it has this rubber sort of coattails. I think this works really well. We can lift that up underneath. Of course, he has the plastic waistcoat and tie and shirt and the gloves, and all this comes together quite nicely. Likewise, if we look at the legs as well, we can see they've taken the effort to actually sculpt in the corduroy, so it's got that sort of ribbed texture to it, which is really interesting and well done. Likewise, the feet as well, we can see that they've managed to sculpt in the spats there, and I think this looks really very good. Articulation wise, there is a ball joint in the neck, so he can move his head from side to side, he can tilt it left and right, and of course he can nod it up and down. There's actually a huge range of motion here on this peg, which is fantastic. Now, it's also got ball joints in the shoulders, so the arms will lift up and out a really good distance there. There's also a complementary bicep swivel right at the top there, and there is double joints at the elbow as well, so that hand can come all the way back to the head, which is fantastic. There is another pin swivel at the wrist, so that wrist will rotate all the way around, and again it will hinge forwards and backwards a pretty healthy distance. There's a straight swivel at the waist, so he can move from side to side, although admittedly it does look a little bit strange when you do that, and you're probably better without it. And there's a closer look at that waistcoat there. Of course, there is also that ab crunch, which does allow him to bend forwards and backwards in theory, but I found mine wouldn't actually move, so just something to be aware of. He has ball joints in the hips, so his legs will kick out to the side. There's an upper thigh swivel there as well. Of course, the legs will kick forwards and they'll kick back, and of course there is another double joint at the knee there, so those lower legs can kick all the way back. Now, there is an ankle pivot. Again, I did really struggle to get much motion out of this. It certainly hinges forwards and backwards, but doesn't really seem to want to move to side to side. Aside from the Build-A-Figure piece, it also comes with a couple of interesting accessories, including a serving tray and a plastic glass, which is pretty cool when he wants to serve Bruce Wayne something to drink while he's at the back computer maybe. So this is quite a nice touch. And he also comes with this empty cowl, which is kind of an unusual accessory. I'm not quite sure what to make of it, really. I think it's interesting, I suppose. Not something I would have thought to add with this figure, but hey, why not? And obviously, as you can see, of course, there are alternate heads. The first of these alternate heads is a comic book version of the character, I suppose, and I think this looks pretty good. Again, I think this would pretty much meet my expectation of what a comic book version of the character would look like. Obviously, it is open to interpretation, depending on which artist is drawing the character, but I think this is a pretty good coverall, and I think, yeah, I think they've done a very nice job with this sculpt once again. I think they've got all the key details there. I think they've done a nice job with the paint taps, and this is quite striking. So, yeah, I think top marks to them. I think they've done a really good job with this head sculpt. Next up, we have the Alfred head sculpt from the Batman 60s TV show, as portrayed by Alan Napier. And once again, I've got to say, I think they've done a fantastic job with this head sculpt. It's really very, very good. I love how they've got the likeness pretty much spot on. There seems to be a lot of detail in here, which is very, very nice. And of course, you know, the paint apps once again have really capitalised on that. So I think Mattel have done a surprisingly good job. As I've said, I've always been a little bit critical of Mattel. They've always been quite toyetic and a bit soft on their likenesses, I would say, overall. But here, I think they're quite sharp, and I think they've done a really good job. And then we have this mystery head sculpt. I'm going to hold my hands up and say I'm not entirely sure what this is meant to represent. I thought at first perhaps it's meant to be Hush, perhaps it's some kind of chameleon-esque character. I'm really not sure, to be honest. I'm guessing it's from the comic books as opposed to any of the other media out there. So please, in the comments, do let me know. Obviously, my ignorance is slipping me up here. But nevertheless, this looks pretty cool, and it's nice to have another alternate head in the mix. To be honest, if I was going to throw in an extra head, I probably would have gone for the Batman the Animated Series version of the character. I know it's very close to the comic book, but it's still very subtly different. Obviously, he's grey rather than having the dark hints in his hair. And I think that would have been a really nice touch, giving us pretty much every definitive version of Alfred there possibly could be at this time. But obviously, I think what we've got here is actually pretty cool, very unexpected, and I think they've done the fans really proud. I think they've done a really nice job, all in all, offering us all these different versatile looks for this one individual character. So, well done, Mattel. Now, before I wrap up, I thought I'd do a quick scale comparison just to see how he stands up next to the 7-inch NECA Batman 1989. Now, one of the criticisms you could have of this version of Alfred from Mattel is that perhaps with this head he's a little bit too tall in the 6-inch line, but obviously if you pair him up against a 7-inch figure like this, it works surprisingly well. I think the scaling looks brilliant, actually. Very, very happy with this. Final thoughts then, I have to hand it to Mattel for producing a really fantastically versatile figure, giving us lots of different options to fit in with any Batman display you want to create. And I think it's a really nicely produced figure all in all. Great articulation, nice attention to detail, some fun accessories, and lots of options. I don't know what else you could ask for, really. This is top marks to Mattel for producing a really fantastic addition to their DC Multiverse line. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.